The air in the Lin family sitting room was thick with the scent of old jasmine tea and unspoken resentments. Outside, the factory whistles had long since fallen silent, leaving a weighty stillness that pressed against the windows. I was mending a tear in my father's old army coat, a futile, sentimental gesture, as he'd been gone for 5 years. The coarse, green fabric was stiff with age, much like the life I was supposed to step into next week. Then the door crashed open. Jacob Carter didn't knock. He never did anymore. But today, there was no perfunctory grunt of greeting, no impatient glance at his watch. His face was a battlefield of emotions I'd never seen before. A raw urgency, a desperate relief, and a cold, calculated resolve that made my needle pause mid-stitch. "Emily," he said, and his voice cracked on my name, like a man finally unburdening himself of a poison. "Let's call off our engagement. I don't have romantic feelings for you." He didn't sit. He stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the fading twilight, and the words fell out of him as if he'd rehearsed them for a lifetime. Perhaps he had. "I believe you wouldn't want to spend the rest of your life forcing yourself into a marriage arranged by our parents either." In that moment, looking at the frantic, almost jubilant light in his eyes, a light entirely at odds with the solemnity of breaking a vow, a cold, sharp shard of certainty pierced my chest. I knew. He has come back too. Because in our previous life, Jacob Carter had never, not once, come to break off the engagement. He had arrived at the wedding hall in a rented suit, his smile a thin, brittle mask, and he had spoken his vows like a man reciting a death sentence. For 20 years, I had watched that mask crumble into resentment, then curdle into hatred. And then I had watched him sign my death warrant with Melissa Zhao preening at his side. My hand, still holding the needle, began to tremble. I hid it under the coat. "Jacob," I whispered, letting my voice crack with what he would perceive as devastated shock. Inside, the shard of certainty was twisting, turning into something cold and sharp. "So, it's a race now." And he had no idea I'd already won the first lap. He mistook my silence for weakness. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a tone of fake pity I knew all too well. "Emily, listen. 3 days from now, during the final adjustment of the new heart-shaped lathe, I'll collapse. Cardiac arrest. I was the factory's doctor in the other time. You saved me." Then we got married, as planned. He spat the word planned like it was a curse. But 20 years, Emily. 20 years of looking at a woman who was a living reminder of a debt I never wanted to owe. I was suffocating. He began to pace, his shadow stretching and shrinking across my mother's faded rug. "Melissa, she is the one I'm meant to be with. If I wasn't worried that people would accuse me of using you for your family's connections, I would have married her a long time ago. You were the obstacle. You ruined my happiness." I remembered that past life with a visceral clarity that made my stomach churn. The car accident, the smell of gasoline and my own blood, the cold, sterile light of the ICU. And Jacob, standing outside the glass, Melissa tucked under his arm like a prized possession, signing the "Do Not Resuscitate" form with the same pen he'd used to sign our marriage certificate. She finally got what she deserved. He'd murmured to Melissa, his voice dripping with a relief so profound it was obscene. "Evelyn, this is my fault you've suffered. Because of me, all lies." Poison dipped in sympathy. I pulled the needle through the coat one last time, breaking the thread. My movements were slow, deliberate, the perfect masquerade of a woman trying to hold herself together. "After all these years," I said, my voice a fragile, trembling thing. I looked up, letting him see the tears I'd learned to summon on command 2 lifetimes ago. "After everything between our families, you're just going to walk away. Because of Melissa Zhao, the plant manager's daughter." I stared at him, drilling my gaze into his. I needed to see the lie. I needed to ensure he didn't see the fury, the calculation, the cold, glacial satisfaction behind my wet eyes. He squirmed. The confident, reborn engineer hated this part, the messy business of human emotion. "Emily, you can't force feelings. One sharp pain is better than a slow, festering death. Believe me, it's better for both of us." I let the silence stretch, let him believe I was grappling with the impossibility of it all. Then I made my move. Not with a scream or a curse, but with the most potent weapon in a woman's scorn's arsenal. A reasonable, heartbreaking request. Jacob, I said, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. A simple, vulnerable gesture. I know I can't make you stay. I only have one request. This engagement was the last thing our parents agreed upon before they died. They gave you a home, a trade. Can you at least come with me to their graves and explain it to them? Let me tell them it's over. Not for you. For me, he hesitated. I saw the brief internal war. The reborn pragmatist versus the lingering ghost of the orphan indebted to the Lin family. Pragmatism won, but cloaked in a veneer of decency. Fine, he said, already turning toward the door. But I need to tell Melissa first. So she doesn't worry. He was gone before I could reply, the door slamming shut on the ghosts of our shared past. I walked to the window, my legs steady now. In the courtyard below, drenched in the amber glow of the setting sun, Melissa Zhao was waiting. She was a splash of gaudy color, a red polyester dress, glossy black hair, a smile that was all teeth. Jacob ran to her, and they collided in a fierce, theatrical embrace. He kissed her, deeply, arrogantly, as if the whole factory was their stage. Their voices floated up, carried by the still air. I knew your heart only had room for me, Melissa laughed, her voice a sharp, triumphant trill. Unlike some people who shamelessly cling to old, dead arrangements. Don't talk about her, Jacob said, but there was no real rebuke in it. Then his voice dropped to a conspiratorial murmur. Melissa, don't forget. In the next few days, go into the mountains. Find that heart-shield herb. The one with the silver-veined leaves. It's crucial. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass and let out a low, quiet laugh. It was a sound of pure, crystalline malice. Jacob Carter, you think you know everything. You know you'll collapse in 3 days. You know the precise moment of your career's most critical turning point. There's no way you'd walk away from that test. But you fool. You absolute, arrogant fool. The key to saving your life was never those 3 withered leaves of a common mountain weed. It was me. And my father's hands. And the 20 years of medical knowledge I accumulated watching your back, saving your life, while you dreamed of another woman. This time, I want to see if your true love can work a miracle. The cemetery was a small, windswept hill behind Factory No. 3. 2 weathered headstones stood side by side under a solitary pine tree, their inscriptions faded but legible. Edmund Lin, master mechanic. And a leaner Lin, beloved wife and mother. I knelt in the damp grass, the scent of wet earth and pine sharp in my nostrils. I had laid a small bunch of wild chrysanthemums, my mother's favorite, on each grave. For a long moment, I said nothing, letting the silence of the dead settle the turmoil in my soul. Mom, Dad, I whispered, my voice catching not with manufactured grief, but with a real aching sorrow that belonged to 2 lifetimes. Your daughter has failed you. I couldn't fulfill your final wish. Jacob and I were calling off the engagement. Behind me, I heard a faint rustle. Jacob. He was standing a few paces away, hands shoved deep in the pockets of his expensive new trousers, his posture radiating impatience. He hadn't brought flowers. He hadn't even bowed. He was staring at the graves of the people who had pulled him, a half-frozen orphan from a snowdrift 20 years ago, and his face was as blank as the stones themselves. A cold fury, so familiar it felt like an old coat, settled over me. Jacob, I said, not turning around. Don't you have anything to say to them? My father carried you on his back for 3 miles through a blizzard. My mother begged her own apprentice, Mr. Gao, to take you in, to teach you the trade. They gave you a life. He shifted his weight, a flicker of discomfort crossing his features before it was smoothed over by that new, insufferable confidence. Emily, why bring up ancient history? Your parents, wherever they are, would want us both to be happy. And I am going to be happy. I'm going to be successful. I'll honor their memory with my achievements. He paused, then added with the magnanimous air of a king granting a favor. And I'll take care of you. Like a brother. That's enough. Slowly, deliberately, I stood up. I brushed the dirt from my knees and turned to face him. In the gray afternoon light, he looked like a stranger. The boy I had once pitied, then married, then feared, was gone. In his place was a man hollowed out by his own ambition, wearing the skin of a reborn soul. Go, I said, my voice flat. I'd like a moment alone with my parents. He almost fled, his footsteps crunching on the gravel path. He didn't look back. I knelt again, and this time I let the real tears fall. Not for Jacob, but for the lost years, the wasted devotion, the lonely nights in my previous life. I know you wanted me to be safe, I murmured to the stones. But you wouldn't want me to spend my life forcing myself to be with a cold, heartless man like him, would you? A gust of wind swept through the pine trees, a soft, sighing sound that felt like an answer. I bowed 3 times, pressing my forehead to the cold earth. Please rest assured, I vowed, my voice hardening into a promise. In this life, Emily Lynn will live for herself. And those who have hurt me, I will make them pay. One by one, as I walked back toward the factory, the air changed. It crackled with the low, electric hum of gossip. A crowd was gathered around the main bulletin board, and even from a distance, I could hear Melissa Zhao's voice, sharp and gloating, cutting through the murmur. You girls don't even know the half of it, she was saying, tossing her hair. Jacob dumped his fiancée for me. He told me he was sick of Emily Lynn a long time ago. He only stayed with her out of pity, poor little orphan girl. Now he's finally free to pursue his real happiness. Laughter rippled through the crowd. A few younger women sighed, romanticizing the betrayal. It's so brave, one of them cooed. To go after true love, no matter the cost. I felt the familiar burn of humiliation, the same burn I had swallowed for 20 years. But in this life, my throat was made of steel. I opened my mouth, a retort sharp as a scalpel on my tongue, but I was too slow. Have you no shame? The voice was a thunderclap. The crowd parted, and Mr. Gao, Jacob's adoptive father, and the man who had taught him everything about metal and machinery, stormed through. His face was purple with rage, his gnarled hands trembling. He pointed a wrench at Melissa. That foolish boy Jacob may have lost his mind, but I haven't. Emily Lynn is worth 10 of you. Even if I'm not lucky enough to have her as a daughter-in-law, I sure as hell won't accept a viper like you into my family. Melissa's face went white, then red. She stomped her foot, a petulant child, and ran off. The crowd dispersed, suddenly interested in their own shoes. I stood at the edge of the crowd, watching the old man's shoulders shake. In my previous life, after Jacob had let me die, it was this old man, already fading into dementia, who had stubbornly kept my photo on his nightstand, who had asked for me with cloudy, confused eyes. Where is Emily? Why doesn't she come to see me anymore? He was the only one who had mourned me. Mr. Gao avoided my gaze, turning to leave. Mr. Gao, I called out, my voice soft. He stopped but didn't turn. Don't thank me, child. I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because it's the truth. His voice cracked. I failed as a father. Raised a wolf, not a man. Before I could respond, a hand touched my elbow. I flinched, then turned. James Shen, a quiet, unassuming technician with kind eyes and a nervous way of hunching his shoulders. Doctor Lynn, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. He looked around, making sure no one was listening. There's something I've kept inside for a long time. It's about the new heart-shaped lathe. About Jacob Carter. His expression was so grave, so burdened, that a chill went down my spine. What is it, James? He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and pressed it into my hand. His fingers were cold. The control system that Jacob is claiming credit for. It's almost identical to the notes my mentor left behind when he died. Before he passed, he told me the algorithm was flawed. It had hidden dangers. It needed years more testing. But Jacob, he just took it. He submitted it under his own name. I unfolded the paper. It was a single page of dense, technical scrawl, with a single sentence circled in red ink. Unstable under prolonged load conditions. Risk of thermal runaway in auxiliary circuits. Do not deploy. A cold, dark satisfaction bloomed in my chest. In my previous life, James had tried to report this. He had been ignored, silenced, pushed to the margins. And the hidden flaws had festered, unaddressed, leading to minor accidents that Jacob had always managed to smooth over. But this time, the technical department had a new chief, a man known for his rigid integrity, a man whose relative was about to be appointed to a high position in the provincial ministry, a man who feared no factory director. James, I said, my voice calm, steady. Write an anonymous letter. Detail everything. Send it to the technical chief's personal mailbox. Don't sign it. Don't tell a soul. He stared at me, his eyes wide. You believe me. I know you're telling the truth, I said. And I did. I had seen the consequences of his silence in another life. The next day, the tension was a physical thing, a greasy fog hanging over the factory floor. I was walking past the break area near Workshop C when I heard the shouting. You ungrateful brat, mister. Gao's voice was hoarse with fury. Jacob stood beside the massive, dormant form of the new heart-shaped lathe, his arms crossed. Next to him, Melissa Zhao clung to his bicep like a limpet. Jacob's face was a mask of cold arrogance, the look of a man who believed he had already won. Dad, please don't make a scene at the factory, Jacob said, dismissive. I know exactly where my future is headed. I don't need you or anyone else telling me what to do. I won't repeat my past mistakes. What mistakes, mister? Gao roared, slamming a wrench onto a steel toolbox. The clang echoed through the workshop. Several workers peeked through the doorways, their faces alight with gossipy glee. The only mistake I made was not letting you freeze to death in that snow 20 years ago. Taking you in, raising you, it was my biggest regret. Melissa pouted. Mister. Gao, that's so harsh. Jacob's just following his heart. You should be supporting him. Get out of my sight, mister. Gao shouted, gesturing with the wrench. Jacob, if you marry this woman, don't you ever call me father again. I don't have a son as disloyal and heartless as you. I stepped forward, my white coat stark against the grime of the workshop. Mister. Gao saw me and instinctively moved, putting himself between me and Jacob, as if to shield me from the venom. Emily, he said, his voice choked with shame. I'm so sorry. Jacob's eyes landed on me, and the arrogance sharpened into something uglier, accusation. Is this you're doing again, Emily? Are you scheming behind my back? He pointed a finger at me, his voice dripping with contempt. I'm warning you, my life is mine to control. I won't let you trap me again. You scum, mister. Gao spat. You do something this shameful and then blame her for it. But Jacob wasn't listening. His gaze was locked on mine, and I saw it there. The same cold, impatient relief I had seen on his face as he signed my DNR order. To him, I was not a woman he had wronged. I was a sentence he had finally escaped. Mister. Gao was not a father who had sacrificed for him. He was a jailer. Melissa tugged his sleeve. Jacob, let's go talk to my father. Don't waste time with these people. They walked away, their shoulders touching, already weaving their new, triumphant narrative. Mister. Gao collapsed onto a wooden bench, his face in his hands. His rough, calloused hands, the hands that had taught Jacob every secret of the trade. Emily, I failed. I raised a monster. I sat beside him and placed a gentle hand on his arm. No, mister. Gao, you raised a boy with a good heart, but he chose to become a monster. And monsters, they always face retribution. He looked up at me, his eyes wet. You really believe that? I know it, I said, and I thought of the anonymous letter winging its way to the technical chief's desk. But you're leaving for that business trip tomorrow, mister. Gao, promise me you'll go. And don't worry about a thing. 3 days passed. I went about my duties in the infirmary, treating minor cuts, dispensing aspirin, smiling blandly at the whispers that followed me. The factory held its breath, waiting for the official test of the heart-shaped lathe. The day arrived crisp and bright. A temporary dais had been erected in the main assembly hall. Provincial officials in dark suits mingled with factory brass. Camera bulbs flashed. Jacob Carter stood at the podium, resplendent in a new navy suit, his hair slicked back. He was in his element, a predator at the apex of his power. This entire control system, he announced, his voice amplified by cheap speakers, was independently developed by me. It features innovative thermal management protocols and a patented load-balancing algorithm that will revolutionize our industry. Melissa, in a scarlet dress that screamed for attention, hovered near the VIP section. When she spotted me standing at the back with my medical kit, she raised her voice, deliberately loud. Jacob is the youngest senior engineer in the province, a true rising star. Some people should finally understand the difference between brilliance and, well, mud. I checked my watch. 10:47 a.m. In my previous life, the collapse had occurred at 11:02 a.m. I began to mentally rehearse the CPR protocol, even though I had no intention of using it. Not yet. The test began. The lathe hummed to life, a deep, throaty roar that vibrated through the concrete floor. Indicator lights blinked green in perfect sequence. Jacob operated the controls with a showman's flourish, narrating each step. Load at 40%, stable. 60%, holding. 80%, the crowd was spellbound. Officials nodded approvingly. The factory director beamed. Then, at 11:01 a.m., a single red light flickered on the auxiliary panel. It was there for less than a second. James Shen, standing near the back, stiffened. I saw his hand twitch toward his pocket. Jacob didn't notice. 95%. We're in the window. Final data is stabilizing, and then it happened. The red light flared, held, and died. The display screen went dark for a heartbeat, then rebooted. But the damage was done. A high-pitched whine, like a wounded animal, emanated from the lathe's core. Jacob's confident smile froze. His hand flew to his chest. His eyes went wide with a terror that was entirely real. "No," he whispered. "Not now." I took the herbs. He crumpled. Not a slow faint, but a puppet with strings cut collapse, his head bouncing off the metal control panel with a sickening crack. Blood trickled from his temple. Pandemonium erupted. Melissa's rehearsed shriek pierced the air. "Jacob," she rushed to him, pulling a small cloth bag from her purse. Dried, silver-veined leaves spilled out. "The heart-shield herbs," she screamed, trying to shove them into his slack, blue-tinged mouth. "Jacob, take them. You'll be okay." "Eat them," the officials panicked. "Call an ambulance." "Where's the doctor?" "Get doctor." "Lin," I pushed through the crowd, my expression a perfect mask of professional urgency. "Miss Zhao," I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria. "Please step aside. The patient is showing signs of cardiac arrest. He needs immediate emergency care." Jacob, semi-conscious, saw me. His eyes, wide with panic, suddenly narrowed. A look of pure, unadulterated hatred contorted his face. He tried to scream something, but only a wet, gurgling sound came out. "Miss Zhao," I repeated, firmer now. "I'm a trained medical professional. If you truly care about Jacob, you will cooperate with the emergency procedures and stop interfering. Even if your herbs are effective, they take time. The top priority is CPR. Everything I said was textbook. Professional. Irreproachable." But Melissa's face twisted into a snarl. She saw me not as a doctor, but as a rival. A thief coming to steal her prize. "Get away from him," she shrieked, shoving me back with surprising strength. She threw herself over Jacob's body, clutching the dried leaves. "Jacob told me these would save him. He has everything under control. What are you really up to, Emily Lin? Trying to save him so you can claim he owes you. Stick to him like a leech again." "Not this time. He's mine," a murmur rippled through the crowd. The whispers shifted. People who had been sympathetic to Melissa's true love narrative now looked at her with a mixture of horror and disgust. Even the factory director, Melissa's own father, looked deeply uncomfortable. His face was ashen. I stepped back, my hands raised in a gesture of surrender. I turned to Director Zhao with an expression of practiced regret. "Director Zhao, as you can see, the patient's family member is highly emotional and uncooperative. I'm afraid that if I cannot perform CPR within the next 2 minutes." I let the sentence hang, imagining the worst. Director Zhao opened his mouth, then closed it. He sighed, a heavy, defeated sound. "Melissa," he said, his voice hoarse. "Let Dr. Lin do her job," but Melissa was beyond reason. She pried open Jacob's jaw and stuffed the leaves inside. He gagged, his body convulsing. The people around her recoiled. "She's killing him," someone shouted. "Those are just weeds. Where's the real ambulance?" I stood silently, watching the spectacle. I knew exactly what was happening. In my previous life, Jacob had collapsed at this exact moment. I had begun CPR within 30 seconds. 4 minutes later, his heart was beating again. It was the most critical window in emergency medicine. This time, the window was slamming shut, leaf by useless leaf. The ambulance arrived 13 minutes later. By then, Jacob Carter was a mottled, still figure on the grimy workshop floor, a smear of herbal paste around his mouth, Melissa sobbing hysterically beside him. But Jacob Carter, it turned out, was a stubborn weed. He didn't die. The factory buzzed with the news, a strange and bewildered energy. Did you hear? Not only did Jacob survive, he's walking. The doctors said it's a miracle. Melissa's been at the hospital day and night, brewing her herbs. She's devoted. Maybe those mountain weeds really are something special. I listened from my infirmary, clipping my nails with precise, calm snips. A cold, deep satisfaction settled in my bones. Melissa Zhao, who couldn't tell a decoction from a dish of dishwater, was suddenly a master herbalist. Unless Jacob had told her. In my previous life, after I had saved him, I had spent years researching his condition. I had pored over ancient medical texts, tested formula after formula, and eventually created a precise, delicate regimen to restore his health. It was a cocktail of rare herbs and specific preparation methods, the knowledge passed down through my mother's family. Jacob, the ingrate, had watched. He had memorized. This time, he had prepared his own way out. He had given the formulas to Melissa, let her play the savior. He had cheated death, but he had also planted the seeds of his own destruction. Because he didn't know the most important part. The herbs he had stolen were potent, yes, but they were also unstable. They required careful balancing with another, counteragent herb. A secret my mother had passed to me on her deathbed, a secret Jacob had never bothered to learn. Without that balancing agent, the herbs were a ticking time bomb. And I, Emily Lynn, had just set the timer. Jacob's miraculous recovery became the stuff of legend. He claimed that his near-death experience had granted him a strange clarity, a burst of genius. He solved problems that had baffled other engineers for years. He was lauded in industry journals, invited to speak at conferences. His career soared to heights he had never reached in his previous life. And at the zenith of his glory, he announced his engagement to Melissa Zhao. The wedding was set for a date exactly 2 weeks later. A date he chose because an astrologer had declared it the most auspicious day of the year. I received an invitation. Gold embossed, heavy cardstock. Melissa delivered it herself, wearing a new dress, her face glowing with a victory so complete it was almost obscene. "Emily," she said, her voice dripping with saccharine sympathy. "Jacob insisted you come. He said you and Mr. Gao are the only family he has. And since Mr. Gao is still away, you, as his dear sister, absolutely must witness his happiness." I took the invitation. I smiled. "Of course, Miss Zhao. I wouldn't miss it for the world." The wedding was held in the factory's main reception hall, the largest room in the complex. It had been transformed into a gaudy wonderland of white roses, gold streamers, and crystal chandeliers that had been rented at great expense. Every notable figure from the provincial mechanical engineering sector was there. The air was thick with expensive cologne, the chatter of deals being made, and the clinking of champagne flutes. Jacob stood on a raised dais, delivering a speech that lasted over an hour. He spoke of his humble beginnings, his miraculous survival, and the woman who had saved him, Melissa, his goddess, his muse. He painted a picture of such profound, devoted love that several of the older women in the audience dabbed their eyes with handkerchiefs. Melissa sat beside him, playing her part to perfection. She looked demure, tearful, overcome with emotion. When he finished speaking and turned to her, she rose and embraced him. The crowd erupted in applause. I sat in the far back corner, in the shadow of a large potted plant. I was wearing a simple gray dress, the same one I had worn to my own mother's funeral. No one looked at me. I was a ghost at this feast, and I preferred it that way. The toasts began. Glasses were raised to the happy couple, to their future, to their enduring love. Finally, the moment arrived. Jacob took a fresh glass of champagne and turned to Melissa. "My darling," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "To us, to a lifetime of happiness," he drank. For a second, nothing happened. He lowered the glass, smiling. Then the smile froze. His hand went to his throat. His eyes widened, not with terror this time, but with a dawning, horrified understanding. "Jacob," Melissa's happy expression faltered. "What's wrong?" He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Instead, a low, guttural groan escaped his lips. His face went from pale to a horrible, mottled gray. He clutched his abdomen, and his entire body began to tremble violently. And then, before the horrified eyes of every guest, a dark, wet stain spread rapidly across the front of his expensive white trousers. He had lost control of his bladder. In front of provincial officials, industry titans, his new bride, a collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. Someone screamed. Melissa shrieked, a shrill, piercing sound of pure horror. Jacob's eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed onto the polished floor, convulsing. The wedding dissolved into chaos. Glasses shattered. Women wept. Men shouted into phones for ambulances. I remained in my corner, perfectly still. I raised my own glass, water, and took a small, satisfied sip. That wine you drank, Jacob Carter, was nothing but a harmless tonic. A bit of ginseng, a few other nourishing ingredients. Perfectly safe for a normal person. But for a man whose system is already saturated with the toxic, unbalanced herbs Melissa has been force-feeding you for weeks. It was the catalyst, the spark in the powder keg. You cheated death once. You won't do it again. At the hospital, Jacob's condition deteriorated with terrifying speed. One moment he was burning with fever, his skin dry and cracked. The next, his entire body would be racked with uncontrollable chills and convulsions. The doctors in the county hospital were baffled. Director Zhao, terrified for his daughter and his own political future, spared no expense. He flew in 3 top specialists from the capital. They ran tests for days, held hushed consultations in sterile corridors. Finally, the lead specialist, a frail man with kind eyes and a grim expression, delivered the verdict. He spoke in the hushed, careful tones of a man delivering a death sentence. The patient has been consuming a combination of highly potent and conflicting herbal compounds. On the surface, they induced a temporary, almost miraculous recovery. But in reality, they have caused severe, irreversible damage to his autonomic nervous system and hepatic function. His body has been catastrophically overdrawn. We can stabilize him, but a full recovery is not possible. One of the other specialists, a younger woman, added, he will likely require lifelong care. The convulsions may continue. There may be cognitive decline. I received the news while tending to a worker who had cut his finger on a sheet of metal. My hands were steady as I applied the butterfly bandage. Jacob Carter, you wanted to live this life free of me. You wanted Melissa to be your savior. Now you have your wish. You are alive. But every day of that life will be a testament to your betrayal. You will be a burden, an object of pity, a cautionary tale. That, Jacob, is my wedding gift to you. The official scandal broke 3 weeks later. The technical chief, true to his reputation, had not been idle. The anonymous letter from James Shen had triggered a quiet, thorough investigation that had expanded beyond the plagiarism to uncover the safety hazards. The evidence was damning. James's mentor's original notes, with their scrawled warnings, were authenticated. Emails between Jacob and a junior technician trying to cover up a near miss during an early test were uncovered. The investigation revealed that the heart-shaped lathe, as deployed, had a fatal flaw. After 92 minutes of continuous operation at high load, a secondary circuit would overheat and fail, potentially causing a catastrophic explosion. In our previous life, the lathe had never been run for that long. It was retired early. But in this life, Jacob's arrogance had been exposed. The news caused a firestorm. The provincial ministry ordered an immediate halt to all production using the new lathe. Jacob Carter, once the golden boy, was publicly accused of plagiarism, criminal negligence, and endangering worker safety. His professional reputation was annihilated. His inventions were stripped of his name. Director Zhao was suspended and put under investigation for favoritism and failing to provide oversight. Melissa's father, her only shield, was gone. She tried to stay. She tried to brazen it out. But the factory is a small, vicious world. The easy desk job vanished. She was reassigned to the sorting floor, a loud, dirty, mind-numbing job dealing with scrap metal. People spat on the ground when she walked by. They called her a man-stealing tramp, a fraud, a woman whose miracle herbs had crippled her own husband. I, meanwhile, continued my work in the infirmary. I organized my father's old medical notes, the real ones, the ones about herbal toxicity and balancing agents. I wrote articles for professional journals, drawing on 2 lifetimes of experience. They were published to quiet acclaim. The factory leadership, eager to distance themselves from the scandal, promoted me to head of the infirmary. He came to me on a rainy Tuesday. I was alone in the infirmary, organizing the medicine cabinet by the soft glow of a desk lamp. The rain lashed against the windows. The door opened with a rusty creak, and Jacob Carter stumbled in. He was a ruin. His face was gaunt, his designer clothes now hung on a frame that had shrunk. He leaned on a cheap aluminum cane, and his left hand trembled uncontrollably. His eyes, once sharp with arrogance, were clouded and hollow. "Emily," he said, his voice a wet, rasping whisper. "Please." I didn't move from my chair. I simply looked at him. "The infirmary is closed, Jacob. Come back tomorrow during regular hours." He took a lurching step forward, his cane clattering on the linoleum. No, you have to help me now. I know I was wrong. Everything was my fault. I shouldn't have believed Melissa." Tears leaked from his red-rimmed eyes. "She left me, Emily. Last week. Said she couldn't handle the illness. Said I was a burden. She took the car, the good television, even the damn toaster." He tried to reach for my hand. I pulled away, my face a mask of professional indifference. "Please, Emily," he begged. "You're the only one who can cure this. I know you have the knowledge. Your family, the balancing formulas. Just tell me what they are. I'll do anything. I'll divorce Melissa, I already have. We can get back together. I'll treat you right this time, I swear." I almost laughed. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it. "Back together," I said, my voice flat. "Jacob, have you completely lost your mind? Do I look like a woman who collects garbage?" His body flinched as if I had struck him. "I was reborn," he choked out, the confession spilling from him like poison from a wound. "I came back with all my memories from the other life. I knew I would collapse. I knew the timing. I thought I could fix my one regret, marrying you. I thought I could have it all, Melissa, the success, the glory. I had the formulas. I thought I had control." He raised his head, his bloodshot eyes locking onto mine. "In the last life, nothing happened to me. You happened. You were always the one saving me. You saved my life, and I repaid you with hatred. And now, it's not too late, is it? As long as I come back to you, you'll save me again. That's what you do. That's who you are." I stood up slowly, letting the full force of my 2 lifetimes of pain and rage flow into my gaze. "Who I am, Jacob Carter, is a woman you killed. You signed my death warrant. You held Melissa in your arms and watched me die." His mouth fell open. The last vestiges of color drained from his face. You remember too." "I remember everything," I said, my voice a cold, quiet blade. "I remember the car accident, the hospital, the DNR form. I remember every sneer, every impatient glance. Every night I lay awake wondering what I had done to deserve such loathing. And now I know. I did nothing. You were simply a rotten, selfish man, and I was your scapegoat." I pointed toward the door. "Now get out. Don't ever show up in front of me again. If you do, I'll call security and have you removed. Whether you live or die has nothing to do with me anymore. Now go and rot with your true love." He stood there, trembling, his mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. Then, with a final, broken sound, he turned and stumbled out into the rain, his cane skittering on the wet steps. I watched him go. I felt no pity, no satisfaction, only a vast, empty calm. The ghost of Emily Lynn, the devoted wife who had died in that hospital bed, had finally been laid to rest. A year passed. The scandal faded. Jacob Carter became a cautionary tale, whispered about in the break room. James Shen, vindicated, became a core member of the factory's technical team. He was quiet, thoughtful, nothing like Jacob's showy brilliance. He worked late, his head bent over schematics, and he never forgot to bring me a cup of hot tea when the evening chill set in. One night, after a particularly grueling shift dealing with a factory-wide flu outbreak, I found a small bouquet of wildflowers on my desk. They were tangled and slightly wilted, clearly picked in a hurry. A note was attached, written in a neat, unassuming hand. Dr. Lin, you look tired. These are from the hill behind the factory. The view is nice. J.S. My heart, which I had thought frozen solid, gave a small, unexpected thaw. The next afternoon, James Shen blushed a shade of deep crimson as he awkwardly asked me to take a walk with him. We walked to the hill behind the factory, the same hill where my parents were buried. The wild chrysanthemums were in bloom, a sea of gold and white. He didn't make a grand speech. He just stood there, shuffling his feet, and finally said, "Emily, would you like to be with me?" I mean, for a long time. Not just walks. I looked at him, his kind, nervous eyes, his honest face, the hands that were stained with grease and calloused from honest work. He was the opposite of Jacob Carter in every way. And for that reason alone, he was perfect. I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my eyes for the first time in 2 lifetimes. Yes, James. I would like that very much. We had a small wedding, just us, Mr. Gao and a few close colleagues. Mr. Gao, his dementia now beginning to cloud his mind, looked at me with confused, happy eyes and kept asking, "Where's that boy Jacob? Didn't he want to come?" And we would gently redirect him, feed him another piece of cake. Years later, I heard about Jacob's end. After being formally dismissed from the factory, he had drifted. His health continued to fail. Melissa, true to form, had abandoned him completely, fleeing to a distant province to marry a man who didn't know her history. Jacob died alone in a rented room, a minor cold turning into pneumonia that his broken body couldn't fight. And Melissa, a new colleague mentioned her years later, a casual piece of gossip. After the divorce, her second husband had been abusive. She had grown delusional, babbling about wanting to go back to her previous life, back to the days when she was the factory director's daughter. She had died by her own hand, using a shard of broken glass from a mirror. I was in the park, watching our 1-year-old son take his first wobbly steps. James was beside me, his hand warm on the small of my back. The sun was soft, the air was sweet, and my son was laughing. Melissa, reborn. The thought flickered through my mind, then vanished. It didn't matter. The grudges, the betrayals, the bitter arithmetic of revenge, it had all been settled. The scales were balanced. Jacob had wanted a life free of me. He had gotten his wish. And I had finally gotten mine. Not the loud, triumphant revenge I had once imagined, but something quieter and infinitely more precious. A life without fear. A love that asked for nothing. A future unhaunted by the ghosts of a past I had finally, fully, let go. The warm sunlight enveloped us. My son giggled and reached for a falling leaf. James leaned over and gently brushed a strand of hair from my face. In this life, I had not fallen for a heartless wolf. I had chosen a man with a quiet heart and steady hands. And as I watched the sun set over the factory smokestacks in the distance, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, I knew I was finally, irrevocably home. If you've enjoyed walking this journey of revenge and rebirth with **RED, Reborn English Drama **, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to keep creating and bringing more powerful stories to life. Every comment means a lot and helps the channel grow stronger each day. Thank you for listening, and I can't wait to see you in the next story.